While researching my family tree, I uncovered many old documents, some from more than a century ago. But when I started to uncover what was never spoken, well, that has made for an intriguing story to add to my family history book. I discovered that my grandfather and his two siblings that we were not even aware of were all born in the Union workhouse of Sheffield, England. The workhouses were for the poorest of the poor, and Britain was a very poor country during these times. The conditions in the workhouses were far from ideal, but certainly better than living in the streets, which sadly many did. At age 11, my grandfather was accused of stealing pence at school and was sentenced to the industrial training ship called the Southampton. This photo is that of a group of boys on the deck of the Southampton. Those sent had been accused of some petty crime or being disobedient. His sister Eliza was the oldest, and when she turned 14, she was sent to the Girls' Friendly Society in Lincoln to be trained as a servant. This was not a punishment for her, but was the usual age when they sent children out to train for work. I discovered this was the house she was employed at in 1911 as a domestic servant. Her whereabouts from there is currently unknown. His brother Harry was the youngest. He went on to stay in the workhouse for another 7 years after Eliza and Grandpa were sent out. He was then discharged to Bernardo Homes, one of the largest organizations that was part of a child emigration scheme to clean out what they called at the time gutter children from the streets of Britain and supply Canada with workers. Harry would be one of the 100,000 British home children sent to Canada, all indentured as farm laborers and servants. They ranged in ages from 7 to 14 mostly, but as you see, some were younger. It was believed they were orphans, but many were not. It is a sad history that is finally in the process of being recognized. Harry was 14 when he was shipped, arriving in 1910. He looks pretty pleased with the prospects that awaited him, and maybe rightly so, after only knowing the life of the workhouse. He was placed on a farm where he worked out his indentured time until he turned 18. He then enlisted in World War I, as did Grandpa, who was still in England. Grandpa married near the end of the war, and soon after immigrated to Canada to join his brother. Harry would go on to enlist in World War II, but sadly, in 1941, he was diagnosed with cancer and died at age 44. 3 years later, my grandfather died at age 52. Both were much too young. Both are my heroes. They may have returned from war, but I think they did not survive it. Harry never did marry, nor had children, so I proudly tell his story, and I do it in many forms. The British Home Child Memory Quilt that is on display around Canada has 56 squares in all, and each hold a home child story. Last Remembrance Day, it was with great honor I handed a wreath over for laying at the cenotaph as they roll called Corporal Harry Parker, 34th and 10th Battalion, and the 5th Canadian Railroad Troops, World War I, the Kent Regiment, World War II, a British home child.